One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. You have asked and I have listened. Today's episode is all about how to have a co-host for your podcast. I'm so excited about this interview. I cannot stop smiling because I was just finishing all of the editing and listening back to this conversation that I had with two of the most energetic podcasters ever. And it was just so fun. So JoAnn and Brie are bringing so much quality information for any of you that are thinking about having a co-host for your podcast. What does that relationship look like? And how can you really develop a show over time with someone else? Like, we're getting all the juicy details and behind the scenes, and I promise you are going to laugh so much in today's episode. You're going to enjoy this conversation because it's very real, it's very open. We share behind the scenes of how we each run our podcast, but also we just nerd out on podcasting and why we love it so much. So I hope you enjoy today's episode with the team from the No Guilt Mom podcast, JoAnn Crohn, who is a former elementary school teacher and the founder of NoGuiltMom.com, where she coaches moms on positive parenting with an emphasis on raising self-sufficient kids, and her co-host, Brie Tucker, who has over 20 years of experience coaching parents with a background in early childhood and special needs. Together, they are the host of the No Guilt Mom podcast, where the best mom is a happy mom, and you're going to love this interview. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of podcasting, think of this show as the time-saving shortcut you've been looking for. So let's get right to it, shall we? All right, Profit Podcast listeners, we have an extra special treat today. I have two co-hosts, and they are in the studio together. So welcome to the show, JoAnn and Brie.
Hi, thank you for having us. We're excited. It's not often we get to be interviewed together for something, so it's very fun.
This is special. This is a special treat.
Yes, well, I love it because, we were getting connected and we were getting everything set up. And then, like, all of a sudden, y'all both popped up on the screen together. And I was like, oh, this is fantastic. Because in my mind, when I think about, having a conversation with three people, I immediately default to, okay, I'm going to have three screens and we're all going to be talking. But I love that y'all are together. So this is so awesome. And I just want to dive right in because JoAnn and I spoke at She Podcast and I watched your talk. You were there with my good friend Anna and y'all are speaking together on this panel. And I just thought, this is so fantastic. I had to talk to you immediately because I was uber impressed with your systems and the different things that you talked about. But we'll get to that in a second. What I really want to talk about is, how did y'all start your podcast? Like, where did this come from?
We actually have a pretty good story about that.
Story. So we've been doing it since August of 2020, and I have had No Guilt Mom for a really long time. Like I started it in 2014 when my son was an infant, and I had a year off from teaching, and that's when I started my company. It started as a blog, and since then it has grown into we do parenting courses for moms as well as create courses for kids, and Brie, I've always wanted her to come on to the company because she's my best friend. She's amazing. We've been friends now, for 7 years.
Yeah. Well, the same year you started the blog. Like when we met.
When I met, I had started the blog.
And I had my own company at that time.
That's right. You had Baby Basics. Yeah. So Brie's always been like very knowledgeable in the education space and early childhood. I'm like, oh my gosh, this will be great. We could work together. And finally, I was able to bring her on in August of last year. And when she got on, I'm like, hey, Brie, guess what? We're going to do a podcast.
And I'm like, okay. I don't listen to them, but I can start.
And I'm like, because I heard, I love the idea of podcasting as a way to have your audience get to know you better and have them get to know your personality while also providing really valuable content, help, and as a way also to talk about our products and to work them into discussions and really have people like know the value of them.
Well, yes, but also I remember one of your big reasons was...
Oh, there was another big reason, yeah.
It lets her talk to all the people that are amazing authors that she's always wanted to talk to.
Yeah.
And like it's amazing. You email random people, you're like, hey, I have a podcast. And they're like, love to meet you.
Love to meet you. We're like, yes!
Holy crap, really? I do that at least once every couple of weeks, right? Like I just did it last week. There was somebody I messaged and I remember reading her bio and I'm like, okay, there is no way she's going to respond. Yes.
Oh, yeah. And you're like,
came right back and was like, yes. And I'm like, holy crap, she said yes.
It's pretty awesome.
Amazing.
Having a podcast is pretty awesome. And it was great doing it during the pandemic too, because all of these authors and speakers, all of their like speaking schedules were clear. And so they had tons of time to come on the podcast.
And it was funny because the same as you, people were like, we would pop on to do the podcast and they're like, you're together?
We're like, we're in each other's pod.
We're in each other's pod. We've always been in each other's pod. Yeah. Like it's just kind of how it's been. Yeah. So yeah.
That's so awesome. Oh my gosh. I love this story so much. So Brie, you're not a big podcast listener. What about you, JoAnn? Like had you already been like, oh my gosh, this would be so fun one day? Like, was it this kind of dream that you had in the back of your mind and everything just kind of came together at the right point?
I'm friends with Ruth Sukup, who does, Living Well, Spending Less, EBA, and she had a podcast, and I saw that whole process she went through from starting it, and I saw the guests she was getting to interview. And at first I'm like, oh my gosh, I could never do that. But then over the years, I'm like, I think I can. And I started listening to hers. And then I really got into the other marketing podcasts in business, like Amy Porterfield. And then the real kicker for me was Armchair Expert. When I started listening to Armchair Expert, and I'm like, I want a podcast like this. Like,
I will admit that was my first podcast. And I still love Armchair Expert. I just can't commit that. It's a long episode.
I love them.
I have a hard time finding
Dax
the time.
And Monica. But it was really like they were the inspiration. And I'm like, it sounds like so much fun. And to do it with like your co-host, your best friend, like it sounds like a blast. And while I was not really liking the idea of doing a podcast on my own, doing it with Brie, I'm like, we're going to do a podcast, Brie, and I think it'll be great.
It's been fun and so
been fun.
easy,
Mhm.
honestly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, well, y'all have a great like dynamic. Y'all have a great chemistry together. So I mean, I'm like, I want to sit like be a fly on the wall in y'all studio when y'all record because that seems like that would be so much fun.
It's fun. A lot of our guests are like, this was a really fun interview. We're like, thank you. That's what we try to do.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
I always tell people,
our
we're
goal.
fun gals.
Yeah,
We're fun gals. There you go.
Well, it's so fun because, I had come up to you, JoAnn, and I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like our worlds have intersected somewhere. And I just couldn't, I was like, is it here? Is it there? And then whenever we figured out it was through Elite Blog Academy, because I had been, in Ruth's world for a long time. I had started as a stay-at-home mom, and I like kind of ventured slowly into blogging, and I found her course. And it's actually her inspiration of her starting her podcast that made me think, well, if she can do this, I can do this, because she makes it, for one, she's just incredible and how she makes everything seem so easy and
She
effortless,
does.
which it's usually
She
not.
does.
And you're like,
Ruth
hang
Sukup,
on,
you make it
I
seem
feel
so
a little
easy.
misled here. Like, give me all the step-by-steps to what you did so I can do it too. But I love that we, have this history together and we didn't even know each other. So this is so cool. And
No.
it's a true testament to what podcasting can do. Like you said, it can connect you with amazing authors and speakers and people that you just never imagined that you would ever be able to connect with. But I want to go back to, you have been a blogger for many years and you've built a business around blogging. And people ask me all the time who are creating content elsewhere, and then they're thinking, I think I want to get into podcasting, but it feels like a big step, or it feels a little bit too complicated. Did you have any of that whenever you were thinking about starting the podcast?
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
So whenever I try a new project, I always look for a course or something that'll help me through it. And so I did take a podcasting course right before I started the podcast. And now it's really like, I can't remember the name of it, but it was Jacqueline Malone and Farnoosh Tarabi's course. It was Pays to Podcast. Yes, it was great. And that took a lot of the overwhelm out of it, like having people walk me through it. But with the blog, I hadn't been writing posts regularly for a bit, because once you have so many on your site, you have a way that people are finding you. Like you have that back catalog on Pinterest and on Google. And I realized that it wasn't the best use of my time anymore to be writing. However, I really wanted to be connected to people and I wanted to make those connections, which is why podcasts really sounded appealing, that I get to talk to new people all the time. Like I'm an introvert, but honestly, podcast interviews are amazing because I could have that permission to go in depth really fast and not have the surface conversations. So I was not overwhelmed by podcasting. I'm like, let's do this. We could like find the stuff as we go. And we did. And actually, it's so funny because I found one of your videos on YouTube and you taught me how to edit through Audacity. Like some of the
so
stuff.
this is the one who taught us how to do that.
Audacity, yeah.
Thank you, Crystal.
You're so welcome. This is so awesome. And I love to hear, everyone's journey is so different, but I think that there's a lot of similarities in kind of looking at what's next. This is usually what will take someone from, I have this idea, or they watch other people. Like you said, you love Armchair Expert. You're like, they just look like they're having fun, which by the way, it's one of my favorite podcasts. I love it. I love it so much. And I just look at all the amazing people that they've been able to interview, the fun conversations, but also just the realness of it all. And like you said, you can go into depth in these conversations, but I'm curious, did it kind of translate? Like you were doing all these things with your blog, like you mentioned, you have all this time and effort and energy that I would imagine you really put into SEO and like, I want to make sure that people can find this. Do you have that same kind of energy towards podcasting? Because I know it's a little bit more of a challenge to get discovered on a lot of podcast platforms.
We're working on that. We were given a hot seat at She Podcast, actually, where they're like, hey, what are you doing?
Well, okay. So I will say this, like with the course that you took with the Pays to Podcast, they really walked you through how to launch your podcast.
Yeah.
So actually we had a pretty good launch right out the get-go, I would say. Like we had our launch squad that helped us with the social media. That also helped us with getting those reviews on the platforms that do have reviews, which, you know, does kind of help give you a little bit more legitimacy. And then, like you said, like we already had our No Guilt Mom website that we could then also add that on there. We have since, like you said, like taken a bit of a turn where we were all like, we found what we thought was an amazing hack and then ended up actually like stealing a bunch of our page. But anyways,
you find it's all in business. Like you only have so much of attention at one time.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to grow one part of your business, like another part is going to like fall to the side a little bit. So then you go back and you like beef up that one. And so it's just a give and take really, but we're working now on getting our SEO up for the podcast. We were given a lot of good tips on how to be found more on these like sites.
Yeah, I would say that's actually like, so like the hot seat was really helpful, but I think we've also learned a lot from our guests.
Yeah.
Like, so we don't just interview experts in the field. We also interview other relevant podcasts that have to do with our audience. So like anyone that talks to moms, we talk to them, or at least we try to. So, right. So like we've been fortunate enough to get a few guests that have very successful podcasts that we did our interview. And then when we were done, we're like, hey, can we pick your brain? And they were like, yeah, sure. Yeah. So we got all kinds of great ideas, like you know, the pod swaps, podcast swaps.
Yeah, podcast swaps are good.
Some of the advertising that we never would have found.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we found some sponsorship through some other podcasts.
We've just started sponsorship, which is very exciting.
Yes. And that came from OSA. So like, it's been a journey. We have learned a lot in a year because we've only been around for a year, but we've learned a lot.
Definitely.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What would, if you were, because my audience loves a good behind the scenes story. So between you working together as co-host, has there been one thing that really stands out as like a big challenge that y'all faced together?
It's really defining, I feel like, our roles. So as the creator of the company, I'm used to having my hand in every single little thing. And Brie's like, yep, she does. Like, and I want to be involved in every single little thing. And so like part of my challenge has been to stepping back and realizing our different roles in the podcast. So like I show up for interviews, I lead the conversation. I do research for guests in terms of reading their books and making sure like we're caught up that way. And then Brie,
so like in my role, and that's funny that you brought that up too, because like when she was like, hey, I want to do a podcast. And I'm like, okay, sure. Sounds fun. And she had, you had the first couple of episodes planned. I'd say like the first 5 were planned. Mm-hmm. After we did the first 5, she's like, okay, so now you're the podcast editor or producer. Good luck with that.
I was delegating.
Have fun.
I was delegating.
And I'm like, what?
But you rose to the challenge.
It has been fun. So I will say like, that was, so that definitely has been our thing that we had to learn between the two of us, like where her role ended, where my role began, what my strengths were, what her strengths were. It's been, I would call it a dance. It's definitely been a dance where we figured it out. And now we have a good rhythm.
We do.
She knows what to expect from me. I know what to expect from her. So like, and in terms of how we figure out who our guests are, what our questions look like, what our format is, what are even all the way down to what our cover art looks like for the episodes. We have a system, and it's always growing and
It's always
changing.
growing, always looking to see where we can improve it and how we can make things a little easier and less complicated. Less complication is a theme lately. And just trying to see like, okay, what are we doing here that we don't need to be doing anymore?
And I think a big part that helps us a lot is, like you said, like our chemistry, the fact that we've been friends for so long. Like either one of us can say something and we know that even if it comes out kind of harsh, it wasn't meant that way. And so we're all like, it's funny because sometimes JoAnn will try to tell me something and she's like, okay, I don't want this to come out wrong. I'm like, listen, I know you love me. Just say it the way you want to say it. Say it the way you want to say it, and I will work with it.
Yeah. And we're also like pretty knowledgeable in psychology. Like we coach parents for, I mean, we have a coaching group. And so we know the communication strategies. We actually teach the communication strategies to parents to help with their kids in our course, Calm and Happy Parenting. So we know all the ways to communicate. And when we have an issue, we fall back on those ways to communicate. And we usually can get it resolved pretty quickly. But it takes a lot of admitting of where I overstepped a boundary and where he's like, come on.
And also where like, it's a lot of things. Because the other thing too, between the two of us, and this is probably something to be aware of when you're looking for a co-host in a podcast, I came from a very corporate world background, entrepreneurship. Like I said, I had my own business. It lasted like 2.5 years. So that just tells you how great that was. Like I did not know what I was doing. So an entrepreneurship world is completely different to me than what I came from. So it's a learning curve for me too. There's a lot of times, right, where I'm all like, that's not how you do it. And she's like, it is when you're an entrepreneur. So yeah.
So it's just a lot of communication, a lot of back and forth. I think the key to like having a relationship is to always be communicative and like always communicate.
Don't fester.
Yeah, don't fester. That is the key to like
And if you're co-hosting too, like I think that would also be something that would really have an impact on our ability to do an episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
If we were festering
like the passive aggressive podcast.
That doesn't sound fun for anybody for sure.
No.
Well,
people are like,
I'm curious. Well, if you had to put like a time frame on it, do you know about how long it took y'all to find your stride? Was it 6 months? Was it just recently when you hit a year? Like what, or even by episode, were you like, okay, after the 10th episode we had it, or the 50th episode? Like, is there anything in there that comes to mind?
It changes. So I would say there's plenty of times where we thought we had it.
Yeah. And then something changes and we're like, oh, it's so much better now. Oh, it's so much better now. Yeah. I always think like we started out of the gate strong. And one of my personal models is to fail fast. So we were actually doing 2 podcast episodes a week when we started because I'm like, let's get them out there. Let's do it. We just went back to 1 a week, which is much more sane.
Yeah. 2 a week was hard.
Yeah. And we just kept learning and seeing how things go. I always think like our interviews and when we're actually on the mic, that's the easiest part. Like that's the part that comes naturally. But the harder stuff is like preparing for an interview and making sure like the book is read, or then after the interview and everything, like you have to coordinate with like,
oh, I suck at SEO. I'm terrible at SEO.
It is a learning curve.
I was just thinking,
everybody sucks at SEO.
Is there an SEO for podcasts for dummies?
No,
I need that book.
You are getting better.
I really do.
You're getting better.
But I would agree. Like, so like to say that, like, when did it become easier? I would probably say like maybe like around probably I would say like it wasn't the first 5 episodes. I mean, those were easy for you, but when you started tossing stuff over to me, it was a bit of a learning curve. I would say like maybe about a month of doing it because I had to do it so much because we did it twice a week. And then the other thing too is, like you said, failing fast. We've tried all kinds of different things. Like we edited our own podcast.
We had an editing service.
Then we had somebody else who edited it. Yeah. Then we went back to doing it ourselves again. Then it was taking too long. So then we went back and got a podcast editor. And then we decided to kind of change some formats. And since we went down to 1 a week, we're like, okay, we can go back to doing it ourselves again. Uh-huh. So, I mean, and our life got easier when I started batching. We didn't batch in the beginning. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So doing that pre-recording, like my anxiety lessens the more episodes I have just sitting there done and ready to be plucked and stuck right in. It's like, I look at it like meal prep, you know, like
it is.
You got them right there in the freezer. You can pull them out and just stick them right online. It's so much easier.
It's so much easier.
Yeah.
This is so good. Y'all are so much fun. I'm just like, I have all the questions because y'all are so entertaining. And I love this because it's just like meal prepping. And it's just like, I feel the same way when I know I'm like, ooh, they're just sitting there. They're just waiting. They're just waiting to be put out into the world. And to tell y'all, like, you should go. Okay, I'm just going to do a shameless plug here. Go check out my YouTube videos and go check out this podcast because I have a lot about SEO for podcasters. So I want you to go check that out.
I will do that.
Yes, gotta up that game. Gotta get it findable.
I know that was our big hot seat. There, like SEO, and I'm like, I hate those 3 letters. I hate them.
They pull up passion. They pull up the podcast thing, and so they're like, so we're gonna search podcast for moms. You should be here, and you're not there. They're swiping. You should be here. We're like.
So you're getting shamed. You're getting podcast shamed.
Getting shamed, and they were airing it loudly over the speaker at She Podcast Live.
Yeah, it was broadcast.
Like, yeah. Only thing we had going for us is it was loud. I don't think everybody could hear it.
No.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. That's so funny.
But we like the hard truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Like you said, if your motto is fail fast, then you're just like, just bring it on. Let's get this fixed now. I love that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I want to know, was there any specific reason? Because I have a lot of people ask me, should I do 2 episodes a week or should I just do 1? Was there any particular reason why you decided to start off with 2 episodes?
I wanted to get good fast. And I knew that with more practice, we would get better faster. And we would get like feedback faster.
I think it really did do well too, because we were doing 2 a week. Like you said, you got to practice the skill. So you got your systems down faster and you were more motivated to get those systems down quickly and to find a good way to do it. But it also gave our audience a chance to hear both formats for us, because since we're a hybrid of doing interviews and just the 2 of us together, it gave them a chance to hear both. And we got a lot of good feedback from our audience as to what they preferred, what they liked. And also it was so great when we had that inkling that maybe it's too much for them. So we did like a survey and they were like, we love your 2 a week, but I can't keep up. I'm like 15 episodes behind. And we're like, we can slow that down.
Even now I'm like, maybe 1 a week is too much. Like,
Well, but you just hit on something really, really important that I always tell my audience. And that is, go back and ask your audience what they want. And so what did a survey look like for y'all? Did y'all just email your list? Did you do it on social media? Like, how did y'all talk to your audience?
JoAnn's the queen of surveys. You're good at getting feedback. She's great at getting feedback.
We did the list. So we have a pretty substantial list for No Guilt Mom. And then we did a little 3-minute podcast episode about it and be like, hey, if you listen to the podcast, go here and tell us what you think. I don't know how many people did that. I think we need to bribe them.
I think we did do a bribe.
We do like a giveaway or something. But
we know people like stuff. So we're not above bribing. We love bribing.
I love this. So is that something, that 3-minute episode, did you put it up and then did you take it back down? Or is that something that still lives on your podcast now?
I think it's still there. Yeah, I think it's still there.
Yeah, the concept of taking it down never even dawned on me until just now.
Well, no, it's good. Well, because I was thinking that would be a great tactic for anybody that's listening, is you could release it as a bonus episode. You could put it up, because I've seen this before where people put stuff up for a limited time for like a launch or something. And they're like, hey, between this date and this date, here it is. And that way it gets sent out to everyone that's already subscribed to your podcast. So you don't have to like cross your fingers and hope like, I hope the right people hear this. People will actually hear it and then you can just take it down. But I love that y'all did it the way that y'all did.
Now I'm like, oh, we should do that for a launch. That is a
we could talk about launch strategies.
Yeah, we were excited when we even were like, oh, look, there's a spot here for bonus content. Yeah. Let's click that.
Yes. I love this.
Learning as
so
we
much.
go.
Well, I want to go into y'all's topic, right? So it's No Guilt Mom. It's all about parenting. And is your audience mostly moms, or is it like kind of a blend of parenting and like the umbrella of parenting?
It's moms. It's definitely moms, because our whole mission is to take the guilt out of parenthood, because so many moms live with the shame that they're doing the wrong thing. And then they have this opposite, I don't want to call it a problem, but it seems to be a commonality that moms take on everything. Like they take on so much. One of our big like chief things in the podcast is that you don't show your love to your family by doing it all. So it's taking all of that off mom's shoulders and helping her delegate more to her family, telling her it's okay, telling her it's a good thing to spend time on herself.
It's a good thing to have an identity outside of being a mom. Like we have these core values that we share with moms all the time. That's basically what No Guilt Mom, the podcast it's our first episode.
Yep.
The No Guilt Mom mindset. And it that's what our theme is throughout everything that we do with No Guilt Mom.
And Brie just demonstrated one of the really great things about having a co-host, because my mind was blank about what we called that. And she came in and she's like, it's the No Guilt Mom mindset. I'm like, that is right. It's the No Guilt Mom mindset.
We have our things that the two of us remember.
Yes.
I love this. But look, just goes back to the chemistry of, I often will see people that say, I got to go find a co-host. And I just I always get nervous because I'm like, I feel this is going to end badly. But I think that y'all did it the right way. Like you already knew someone that you could spend hours with and not get sick of each other. And then you're like,
we went on a whole
microphone anyway.
Oh yeah. It got crazy. Like she just said, like we took a 2-week vacation to Europe together.
Yeah. So it's like
one of our
vacations,
friends.
we don't even get vacations.
But it's good. It's good. Again, like we have that relationship where we understand each other, and that makes, and like you said, it makes it easy. I don't think that you could just pick another co-host and find somebody out of the blue.
You can't. I actually have experience with that.
Yeah.
I started my company with a friend, and we did not see eye to eye at all. And that friendship is now ended. And it wasn't that long. Like it was like maybe 6 months doing a company together. So like some people, like it does come down to chemistry, and it comes down to the willingness to communicate and work through things.
Well, and finding your strengths, right? And being able to fall into those roles and to embrace them. And I think it also goes back to the whole No Guilt Mom mindset. I can't do everything. Neither of us can do everything. So finding what we're good at and rolling with that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious because, I have like y'all's official backgrounds and your information, but when it comes to parenting and doing like teaching the things that you teach on your podcast, in your programs, in your coaching, everything that you do either one of you have a PhD in parenting? That's really what my question is.
No, I don't think anyone could have a PhD in parenting.
But the reason why I ask this is because there's so many people in my audience that say, well, I don't have a PhD in that. Therefore, I'm not the foremost expert and I can't, they're scared. It's the thing that's holding them back. So have you ever experienced anything like that in your journey where you're like, I don't know if I am qualified enough to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway? Or do you have any stories?
Imposter syndrome?
Every day I so it's so interesting because when I first started my blog, I was like trying to take away the teacherness out of it, because especially here in Arizona, teachers aren't exactly respected. Like their viewpoints aren't like respected at all. And like, it's more of the parents know what they're supposed to be doing and the teachers have no idea. That's the general viewpoint here. And that's what I dealt with when I was a classroom teacher, and how my views were kind of looked at. So when I started the blog, I was really trying to portray myself as like, I'm just a mom like you. I have 2 kids. I deal with it every day. And it changed for me when I really got more involved in Elite Blog Academy, and I joined Ruth Sukup's mastermind that she was organizing. And we were talking about credibility. And I was like, yeah, like I'm a parent. They're like, what else? I'm like, oh, and I just brushed this off, and it sounds so silly to say it now. Oh, like I'm a national board certified teacher and I have a master's in education. And she's like, what? Like, why aren't you saying
you led with parent first?
Yeah, I led with parent. And, but it just goes to show you, like, it's the same regardless. Like you could have all the credentials in the world, and some people are going to see that and be like, whatever, I'm not going to listen to an expert. Like it has to be someone who's like in the trenches with me. And then other people are like, wow, like those credentials really like show that she knows what she's doing. But you can't predict that. And that's not the thing that's going to draw people to your podcast. The thing that draws people is that you show that you have empathy for them. You show that you know them. You show that you have like experience dealing with the same kind of issues that you're talking about on the podcast. And also, I think a big part is you make it fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because nobody wants to be bored. Goodness
Yeah.
gracious.
Yeah.
No.
But I mean, yeah, like I don't have a master's degree in education like JoAnn does. But I mean, again, when it came to this, the reason we felt like it would be a good fit was like, I have over 20 years
Yeah.
experience coaching parents and families. My degree's in psychology, so I bring that in a lot. And both of us have a lot of experience in different areas. Like again, like I've been divorced. So I know about co-parenting and those kinds of struggles. And we have kids of different ages and all that kind of stuff. So like we definitely have a lot, but we do. Oh man, even though we've done this, we still both will have times where we'll admit to one another, God, I don't feel like I'm qualified to answer this question. And then luckily, because the two of us are here, we can coach each other and be like, no, you totally got
You
this.
totally got this.
And it's kind of, it helps.
Imposter syndrome is totally real. Like it never goes away. You can have
We were just talking to someone this morning.
Yeah.
That said that.
Build on the experience, and still you look at what you've made and you're like, oh, like, why does anyone listen to me? So like those feelings that your audience is having, know that like we have them too. And we have a podcast that has over 100 episodes. And the key is you just go out there and you do it. And that's how you get the experience.
Because you know what the truth is? People do want to hear from you.
Yeah,
they really do.
Yeah.
So,
y'all just gave someone the biggest gift ever. And that was the right answer, by the way. That was the right answer. You just go and you do it.
You just do it. And those people in the cheap seats who are saying like, you shouldn't be doing that. Guess what? They're not in the arena. Like Brene Brown likes to say, they're not in the arena with you. They're not like doing the same thing. And they have no business telling you what to do. So if anyone is saying that you don't have the experience for something, know that they are in the cheap seats, because someone who is actually in the arena doing it, they will never criticize you for that.
Right.
This is so good. This is so good. Oh my gosh. Like, I love that y'all have such a passion behind what you do, and you know that you have a message that needs to be shared. I think that that's another thing too, is, for anybody that's listening and they're like kind of going back and forth, I was like, I don't know if I'm good enough, or I don't know if I have enough experience. I think that if you have enough passion behind what you're talking about, you will go out and get that experience, or you will bring, like y'all were talking about, bring the authors in that do have it, and then have fun conversations. I mean, I think that that's what's so cool about podcasting as a platform, being able to, really just have amazing chats with people and learn. Like, I'm learning so much from y'all today. I think that this is really cool to experience what y'all are doing and how y'all are helping, the working mom community, the parenting community, and everybody that's listening. Y'all have to go check out the No Guilt Mom podcast for sure. But I have a question about your podcast as it relates to your business. So are you using your podcast as like the top of your funnel? You're hoping that someone will discover your podcast, or someone says, hey, go listen to this podcast, it's really helpful, and then they'll come into your community that way? Or are you using your podcast to serve the people that are already there?
It's both. It's really both. The podcast is a great way to bring people in, especially when we interview guests who have a similar audience to ours. It's a way for us to like share that similar audience, because it's like, oh, you guys have our people over there. Like, you should come on the podcast and we'll swap. And so that's a really great way to build the business and bring people in. We also use it to like answer the questions that come in a lot with the business. We use it to promote product launches. We just used it to promote this launch of Calm and Happy Parenting, which just ended as we're talking this week. So both. Yeah, we use both. Yeah.
And we just recently started with sponsorship in the podcast, but honestly, that's our goal with sponsorship is just to cover the cost of the podcast. If we can cover the cost of like that it costs us for the mics and the membership to this and the ads for that, then it's a win, baby.
And honestly, the sponsors we've had so far in terms of the business have been really great.
I know,
do. They're like products we want to use.
Well, that's because you're very particular about it. So like we all, from the get-go, we've taken the role, and that came from JoAnn's experience. Because I was like, anyone that offered us money, I'm like, can I tell her? Okay, I'm not going to use names, but somebody reached out to us and said that they think that they would love to advertise with us because they do they do male hygiene, grooming. And they felt like the moms of our audience would like to purchase them for them. And I was like, hey, if they're willing to pay us. And she's like, Brie, we have to have some standards. That really doesn't match the no guilt mom mindset. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess you're right.
No, I thought you were going to tell the hair story.
What hair? Oh, the hair story. That's another one. We got all glossy eyed when someone offered her free hair color. And now that is like just not going away. It's like the ex-boyfriend that like, you called one night because you were bored, you went out, and now they think you're interested again and they won't stop calling you.
Well, because it's funny because, experience as a blogger, when you first get into blogging, there's a lot of free stuff that you're like, oh my gosh, I'm getting all the free stuff. And then you
like,
get the free stuff and you have the expectation then of writing the post about the stuff you literally don't like. Like, I mean, it's okay, but you don't love it as much. And so it's one of those hurdles you get past as a business owner, being like, okay, you know what? My time and my audience are worth more than free stuff and promotion. Because a lot of people try to like barter with you and be like, oh, but you'll get like, what do they call it? The reach or the promotion, or we'll share you on our social channels, the exposure. That's it. And they'll be like, we'll give you exposure. And that's a no. Do not do it for the exposure ever, because it does not. It is not.
But I think it helps because, like you said, like we do use our podcast to help promote our brand, No Guilt Mom. So because of the fact that we're not constantly saturating it with sponsorship and with paid ads, I feel like people really do hear what we're talking about for No Guilt Mom. And when we do have sponsors, they do
super
listen
cool.
more. I think honestly, my hope is that there's a lot less of hitting the 30-second skip as soon as we start talking.
Yeah. Well, I think that you just gave someone who's been thinking about sponsorships, because there's a lot more people coming into my sphere. At first, our audience was mostly people that wanted to start podcasts, but now that we're over 300 episodes now. So people are like, we've started the podcast. Now what? So we're getting into this talk of sponsorships and working with companies. And I love that you shared, you have standards, because I think it is so important, because something magical happens when you publish your podcast, you start getting all the podcast pitches, you start getting these rando like companies that you're just like, I would never work with you. No, like, please go away, delete, not going to happen. Have y'all had any other like experiences like with getting bombarded with guesting or just a bunch of random emails? What's that been like for y'all?
Yeah, we have a process for that.
Yeah, we have a process now. It's like when they first started coming, it was like you just said, you're excited. You're like, oh my gosh, people are coming to us. and then it turns into, oh my gosh, people keep coming to us and I can't read them all fast enough. So we did start with we love Typeform. So we started with Typeform. We had a Typeform where we made like a they can pitch themselves to us. And that has gone through changes too. Again, it's always living and breathing.
And I think one of the big things that we put on that Typeform is like, we will get back to you if we are interested.
Yes, I had to. So like over time, that started with somebody had put that on theirs, and I forget who. It was somebody fairly big that I had pitched to. I don't know if it was like Brene Brown or somebody, and they had that on their form. And I thought, oh, I love that, where it says like, don't call us, we'll call you. Because I was like, oh, that's really helpful. And so then now it's to the point where where the form says at the end, like, thank you so much for submitting. We'll get back to you within this many business days, because due to the amount of requests that we get, it is simply impossible for us to respond back to everyone. So I felt like it was important to give that explanation. It's like, we're not trying to be rude. We just honestly, there's just too many now that we can't get back to everybody with.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, this is great. And I know JoAnn spoke at She Podcast about systems and workflows and processes. Is there one thing that y'all are just like, I'm so proud of this one system that we have? Like, is there anything in particular you're just like, but this was systems. like before it was installed, and then now that it's done, you're like, I don't even think about it because it's so incredible. Do you have anything that stands out?
Our guest intake form, definitely, where
yeah.
we ask them to give us their bio and their picture is like, that's the number one thing like that we had to hunt down. Like just having a place where all of that information lives so that you're not trying to keep track of a dozen emails or like things from other people. That's, I think, the biggest time saver. What would you say?
Well, first of all, I would say JoAnn is the queen of integrations. Like
I'm like-
she is excellent at finding programs that have integration tools.
If there's a Zap I can make, I'll make the Zap.
And I am so grateful for that because I love organization and I love checklists, but I'm not tech savvy. So the fact that she's willing to take on the tech savvy part of it, and then I'm happy to take on the checklist and the organization part
I'd
of it.
say though, in the past year, you have become more tech savvy.
I'm more tech savvy than I was.
Yeah.
But so I would definitely say like, yeah, that those integrations have been super helpful. The fact that like Calendly, I don't know where we would be without Calendly.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's where our integrations start. Like when they sign, when we have them sign up for their interviews, and then it collects all that information and then it brings it into the organizational program that we're using, which we just we're in the process of switching from one to another because again, things grow. And we're trying to find what fits us best because like when we started, it was just the two of us. Now we have an assistant that's working with us. We're hoping to grow even more, and being able to grow and move, I think has been a huge deal.
Yeah. And do you do that through, so you have Calendly, do you use Typeform for all of that? Do you use Google Forms? Like, is it just kind of like whatever, I don't know, just walk us like real fast, like a snapshot of what the integrations. Cause I'm nerding out over here. I'm like, tell me all the things.
It is really, it's Calendly in Typeform. So when guests first agree to an interview, then they get a link to the Calendly, which they pick their date. And then right after that, it's a link to the Typeform where they enter all of their information, give us their photo. And that Typeform used to integrate, I'm going to call out a company right now because I am not happy, but used to integrate into Airtable. And then Airtable recently made it that you have to upgrade your Airtable subscription to have Typeform integrate anymore. And so now we are switching everything to Google Sheets to keep it instead of our Airtable.
We're not made of money, people. We're not made of money.
Yeah.
It's like, we're like, we're going to call out the service that's giving it to us for free. And
yeah.
No, Airtable should charge for what they need to charge for. I am just a little bitter, but
well, but it's good to know. It's good to know because everyone always asks me like, well, what are the because I use a lot of free tools and there's some tools that I pay for. So it's good to know these things because I agree. There's some tools that you're just like, I couldn't live without Calendly. I started using it and then they're like, oh, you need more events. You got to pay for it. I'm like, take my money. You made my life easier. I don't even care. But then there's other ones that I'm like, ooh, hang on. I'm not quite ready to really take that leap. So we get it. We totally understand.
And I mean, the reason we use Typeform instead of Google Forms is that Typeform integrates with our email system so that we could use our surveys and stuff for No Guilt Mom. And then we could tag people who took the survey and we could follow up with them and we could do all these things. So,
all the techiness. I love it. I love it so much. We're going to geek out. After we're done with this, we're going to geek out some more on podcast integrations because, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. Well,
and
I want
leaving right now to start it. So.
Yeah. Brie is on a mission. She's got some other stuff that she's got going, but JoAnn and I are going to keep going because we are going to enter into our rapid fire questions segment. So are you ready for that?
Okay, I'm ready for rapid fire. She's missing Brie's like, I'm missing the fun part.
I was going to say, and if Brie can make it back in time, we will absolutely have her answer the questions too. But I just have 3 questions.
Okay.
And so the first one is, what piece of advice would you give to a brand new podcaster?
Oh my gosh, just start as fail fast. I'm like, I could think of all the pieces of advice, but I think one place I got really hung up is on having like all expensive equipment. Like I'd have to have like the best mic or the best like editing or the best whatever. And honestly, there is stuff out there that you could get that is not that expensive. I mean, the mics we use are only $100, which I mean, compared to like the mic market, it's pretty cheap. And that you don't need to have the absolute best top of the line tools to have a really great podcast.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. The second question I have is a two-part question. And the first part is, what is the dream podcast you would love to be on? And who is your dream podcast guest?
Oh, okay. I could answer this for both of us, actually. Dream podcast I'd love to be on is, of course, Armchair Expert. Like, call me. Call me.
Monica, Dax, if you're listening,
Oh my
please
gosh.
give them a call. All of us a call.
Whenever they talk about their kids on there, and I'm like, I have some ideas for you. Like,
This is so good.
I'd love to be on it. And our dream podcast guest, who we continually go after, is Brene Brown. Like, Brie has reached out to Brene Brown so often, and like they keep telling us no, but one day it's gonna be a yes. It's like the dream podcast guest.
Yes, she has her own folder. That's my vision board. I made her a folder, and every time her staff is so sweet. Oh, thank you so much, but this doesn't really fit with her schedule. Okay, great. Talk to you again in 6 months. Bye.
Yeah. We'll be back. I
got your folder. You're good to go.
Yeah.
Well, it's so funny because we live, we're in the Houston area, and I always am like, I have this crazy thing in my mind. I'm like, what if I walk into the store and she's there? Like, really? And she doesn't even live in the same part of Houston that I do, but I always have this like, but what if it could happen? Like, I mean, I don't know. I'm just, and if I do, I'm going to tell her, I'm like, I have friends that have a podcast that you got to go check out.
Please.
They're going to say, Brie, we know who she is. She keeps, okay, we'll reach back out to her.
Yeah. Like, I got this friend, Brie, the cheese girl. You can't miss that name.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is so awesome. Okay. My last question is, do you consider yourself a perfectionist?
I don't consider myself a perfectionist, although I give myself a hard time in like after I do something and I'm like, I should have done that better. But perfectionism never stops me from doing something, if that makes sense. It's always, I give myself trouble on the after I do it, but that's something I'm working through.
I'm making this face because I don't consider myself a perfectionist. However, I do know there has been many, many, many times JoAnn and I have had a conversation where I'm like, I'm not done with this yet. She's like, why? I'm like, because it's not good enough. And she's like, good enough to try it. So I would say like, I maybe have like some of that in me, but not a ton. Like I'm all about embrace the messiness, people. Like,
yeah, I don't believe perfectionism is something that you are destined to live with for the rest of your life. I think that once it's pointed out to you, and that I was talking about the growth mindset and knowing that the brain is a muscle and the more you use it, the better it gets, is something you can get over. So even though all of us may have perfectionist qualities, it is much more advantageous to you as a podcaster to adopt the motto of fail fast. Where if you have an idea, you need to try that idea because it's sitting in your brain. It's not going to get any better in there. It's only going to get better when you get feedback on it. And that's why you have to put it out in the world.
Yeah, you definitely have to have that community, right? Where you can bounce that off and be like, okay, I don't know if this is like, and have other people be like, dude, it's good. It's good. Yeah. It's good enough. Do it.
Yeah. Just push your reaction. Just
push you off the ledge sometimes.
This is so good. Oh my gosh. Well, can you please tell everybody where they can find more about No Guilt Mom and read your podcast, read your blog, listen to the podcast, and learn more about the different courses and programs that you offer for parents?
Yes, go to noguiltmom.com. That is our main hub. And once you're there, make sure you sign up for our happy parent checklist because that's how you're going to get continuous communication from me and Brie about everything that's going on in No Guilt Mom and all the help to help you as a parent. And then as far as the podcast goes, we're on all major podcast platforms.
Yep.
No Guilt Mom searches. Don't search podcasts for moms, apparently. SEO wise, we're not good.
We're working on that one.
No Guilt Mom, it will come up.
Well, in social media, it's not hard to find us either because our handle is at No Guilt Mom.
No Guilt Mom.
Whatever platform you're on, that's us. So
perfect. All right. And we're going to have links to everything in the show notes because I want everybody to go listen to your podcast. I love the dynamic that the two of you have together. And I just, I can't wait to dive more into it because this was such a fun conversation. So thank y'all for being here today.
Thank you so much
This
for
was
having
so
us.
much fun.
It was fun.
I love this.
I love being on this side where we just get to be silly and
I
we don't
know.
have to like worry about guiding an interview. It's really good.
I really hope that you just have a huge smile on your face right now, because that's exactly how I felt listening back to this conversation that we had. It was just so much fun. The whole time I was smiling when JoAnn and Brie are just sitting there and they're pitching and catching and going back and forth. And they make such a dynamic duo when it comes to running their show and running their business and really just incorporating all the things that they love about parenting and being a mom into their show. So I hope that you take the information that was shared today and you run with it, that you were reminded that you don't have to have a PhD in whatever it is that you're talking about on your podcast. You really just need to have a passion for what you're talking about and surround yourself with other people who are just as passionate about your topic. So make sure you go check out the No Guilt Mom podcast. It's going to be linked in the show notes. Go to crystalprofit.com/episode 321 to connect with JoAnn and Brie, and make sure you go listen to their show. I'm going to have their social links and everything else there for you to go check out. So again, that's crystalprofit.com/episode 321. But that's all I have for you today. So if this is your first time tuning in, make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button wherever you're listening to this podcast. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message, because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.